SMITE 2 has been an absolute joy lately, and one of the biggest things I've been enjoying is the introduction of aspects. One of them that has been slightly overlooked has been Hecate's, mostly because in middle lane it's not going to be as good as just having your regular 2. You're going to miss out on some damage, and especially getting to pick your target, but where it's really good is actually in support. It can be pretty good in solo too, which we might talk about a little bit later, but for me, I have been using this in support. So today I want to break down for you how I've been using this build right here with these exact items, and as we're going to get into later in the video, how you can actually apply it to your own gameplay and how to go out every step of the game, including the start of it, the mid game, and the late, so that you can use this in your own games and flourish as well as I have been, because this has been my main go-to to climbing in rank lately, and I've been having a lot of fun with it and a really high win rate with it because it's just very applicable to the current meta of SMITE 2. So with all that out of the way, I think we can start talking very briefly here about the actual build itself. So right now, I just want to tell you what items you're going to be building for this build. But I'm not going to talk about how they're going to be applied in the actual gameplay yet. We're going to talk about that when we get to the gameplay section. This is just going to be a quick overview of what items you're buying and what order to buy them in. Starting off here is a kind of a weird thing for support, but we're going to be starting with a warrior's axe. Usually you want to have a selflessness or a war flag. Why? Well, those two items have passives on them that provide you with extra healing and mana regen when you get assist on minions, so you can just be a really good backup on clearing those lanes and let your ADC clear those lanes, your mid, when you start roaming, and it lets you just sustain up. That also gives you bonus gold, so that you can stay in the game without falling behind all of your teammates in the gold game, because that's a big thing in support. You're not getting those last hits, you're not trying to take last hits on enemy kills, so you kind of fall behind in gold a little bit. Same thing with XP a lot of the time. But when you're playing an aggressive support like this, you're going to go something like Warrior's Axe here. This has been so instrumental, especially for something like sustain on Hecate, which is what you're going to need when you're in this support position. And we'll tell you later on how this goes even more into her kit, especially with the aspect and why it's so easy to proc this. But just know, this is what I've been building. It gives you a little bit of strength early on, for those autos, and 10 of each protection to kind of help you out there. And later on in the game, you are going to take that to a Sundering Axe. Right after that, the first item you're going to be building into is going to be a Gladiator's Shield. Now, this item gives you 40 protections of the physical variety. I don't know why I said it like that, but it gives you 40 physical frat, 150 max health. With max health in this current meta of SMITE 2 is very powerful because prots don't feel as good, so just having a big health bar is something that you're going to be looking for a lot of the time in support. And last but not least, it gives you 10 cooldown rate. Of course, nowadays we actually can overstack cooldown rate with diminishing returns, and we will talk about that more later into this video. But just know you're going to see a lot of cooldown items in this build. Now, what else does this do? Well, it has a passive on it that says when you hit enemies with your abilities, they take 15 plus 25% of your item protections as bonus physical damage. This effect only triggers once per ability per god. So every ability you shoot out, every god that gets hit with that can get hit with a Gladiator Shield proc. And you probably already see where this is going. This is a big proc build. You have several items in this build that are just made to proc off your abilities, because what your aspect does is very easy for hitting those procs where you don't even have to do anything. You just let the enemies play their game and they're going to be procking it on themselves. We'll get into that in the gameplay section. So after this Gladiator Shield, we already started with a little bit of the physical protection, which is good. And I'll tell you why that physical protection, especially early, is so good later on once we get to the actual gameplay application part of this video. But we still want some more physical protections maybe. So what do we want to go next? Well, we want to continue on with that theme, especially when it comes to the cooldown rate. So we're going to get ourselves a Breastplate of Valor. This is still an amazing item carried over from SMITE 1, just like our Warrior's Axe is and just like our Gladiator Shield is. And what this does in SMITE 2 is 40 physical protections. So right there, we're doubling our physical protections from our Gladiator Shield. With another 40, we're up to 80 now. This also gives us 250 max mana and 2 mana regen. Something you will notice early game is with this aspect, how you're going to be playing is a little spammy. There was a bug when this first came out, and actually Hecate 2 wasn't using any mana, which I didn't even notice at first. I was sitting there every game and I was like, wow, Hecate's mana sustain is so good. Like, I don't even feel like I'm using mana half the time. It's because I wasn't, and they have since patched that bug, so you will notice you do go through mana a little quickly. Be a little careful, especially now that they have patched that out. You need to actually budget your mana, but when you get this breastplate online, it's going to solve that very easily. This gives you 25 more cooldown rate though, and that's the biggest thing we're looking at. With that combined with your Gladiator Shield, you already have 35 cooldown rate, very good, and 40 is the soft cap, which again we'll talk about later in the actual gameplay application. section part of this video. Last but not least, though, I do want to say Breastplate of Valor does have its own passive in SMITE 2, and it says when you lose 500 plus 25 level HP, your ability cooldowns are reduced by 1 second. So if you lose a big chunk of health, that's okay, because it will just straight up take 1 second off of your ability cooldowns, so you can go ahead and just keep spamming your abilities, keep proccing your Glad Shield, keep proccing your Warrior's Axe, and that stuff very early on is what you're going to want to see throughout the whole game, really. So that item right there is very good. You already have so much physical protection, which in most games is what you're going to want early on, and we will talk about the order of these being switched up in a little bit, but I'm going to wait till I tell you the whole entire build before I tell you how you might want to switch that order up, depending on the enemy composition. Now, after the Breastplate of Valor, you're going to go for a Gem of Isolation. This has been one of my favorite support items to build in SMITE 2. And in fact, if you watched my channel at the end of the SMITE 1 lifespan when I was making content on that game, Gem of Isolation was something that I was messing around with a lot because I think it's actually quite versatile. One of the most common, if not the most common debuffs that gods have in their kits in SMITE is a slow. And high risk kind of knows that. That's why something like Hussar's Wings, which I can show you here really quick, which is added to the game, which gives you protections, max health, and it gives you immunity to slows. That's very strong in SMITE because slows are extremely prevalent in SMITE. So that can be a counterplay to Gem of Isolation, but for the most part, you're going to see that on maybe a support or a solo on the enemy team. You're not going to see that on the ones that you really want to be targeting, which is going to be those squishies, those mid laners, those ADCs, and this item does that quite well. This is going to give you 50 intelligence, which of course is very good. That's going to help you just scale up some actual damage on your abilities. A lot of the damage from this kit is going to be coming from proccing things like your axe and your gladiator shield, but so having a little bit of int in there, which you will with one other item in this build that I'll show you towards the end, is very good, just so you can do a little bit extra of that damage there with some scaling on your actual abilities. This also gives you 350 max health. Like I said earlier, max health is really good in the SMITE 2 meta right now. Chin size is pretty prevalent in ADC builds and even some builds for like solo lane Bellona, but for the most part, you still want to be building that max health pretty often, and a lot of items in SMITE 2 have a big max health pool on them, so you're going to be building it just without even thinking about it a lot of the times anyways. Again, this does have a passive on it, and it says when enemy gods are hit by your abilities, they're affected by a 15% slow for 2 seconds. 15%, is it a big slow? Not really, but it is very much so noticeable, especially when you're trying to catch up to someone and you can just keep applying a 15% slow. It can be very, very effective, and you'll very much so like it in this build because a lot of this build is just about control and area denial. After that, we're going to build ourselves a Genji's Guard. We already have taken care of our physical protections, right? We have our Breastplate of Valor, we have our Gladiator Shield, that's some great stuff, but now we need to handle the actual magical protections a little bit more. Genji's Guard is an amazing item, again, carried over from SMITE 1, and it does basically the same thing. It's going to give you 45 magical protections, 300 max mana, and 5 mana regen. So again, that mana issues, they're really not going to be issues, especially late game when you have this built with the breastplate. These two things give you a lot of max mana, a lot of mana regen, so you won't be worrying about that. And it's going to give you 10 more cooldown rate to really stack on top of your breastplate and of your gladiator shield. We are already at 35 cooldown rate. With this tacked on, we're going to be at 45 cooldown rate, which is pretty darn crazy. And we are officially past the soft cap of 40% cooldown rate at this point. So we will start seeing diminishing returns. Again, we'll talk about that when we get to the gameplay section, but just know that it's completely fine, and I'll explain to you why it's fine in SMITE 2 once we do get there. Now, this does have a passive, just like all of our other items so far, and that says when you take magical damage from abilities, your cooldowns are reduced by 3 seconds. This can only occur once every 45 seconds. So, very simply, once every 45 seconds, when you get hit by magical damage, you're going to take 3 seconds off of your cooldowns. That, obviously, very good, because a lot of this build, like I've been saying a couple times, is about spamming, and we're going to talk about that soon. I keep saying that, but that's because we are going to talk about everything soon. I'm going to fill your little beautiful brain, don't you worry. It's very good though. You get some magical protections on board. You're going to be feeling a lot tankier at that point to those magical characters coming at you. You're going to feel really good spamming your abilities at that point, and you're going to be worrying about mana problems. Not at all. Next up, what are we going to go? We're going to go for a Shield of the Phoenix, an item that you're seeing a lot in a lot of builds right now because it's just so strong. Because sustaining is really strong in SMITE 2 right now because you get beat up a lot. There's a lot of damage in the game, which is kind of a split. I think some people in the community think there's not enough damage in the game. Some people think there's too much damage in the game. I think there might be a little too much damage in the game from certain characters, especially kind of mages. And mages like Hecate here, which, you know, mage is kind of an outdated SMITE 1 term, but let's be honest, Hecate is an all-around mage. She's very good at proccing this Shield of the Phoenix, especially with her aspect on here. She can proc it so often. What's it going to do for you though? It's going to give you 30 physical protections. It's going to give you 250 max health and 10 more cooldown rate, because high res, I don't know, they have just a raging hard on for adding cooldown rate to a lot of items in Smite 2. In fact, I can even show you here in game. If you click the cooldown rate page, there's a good amount of items here with cooldown rate, and a wide variety is what I really want to say. Like, look how many defensive items here have cooldown rate on them. This is a good bit compared to Smite 1. Is that more or less? I want to say it's probably pretty equal, but I do think they might be adding Mantle of Discord, and Mantle of Discord has 10% in Smite 1, I believe. So if they had that item, they might have another protection item with cooldowns on it, but I could be misremembering anyways, because I haven't played Smite 1 much often, because I'm on that Smite 2 grind. Anyways, Shield of the Phoenix, very good. Well, of course, because of its passive, anytime you hit an enemy god with an ability, you're healed for 2% of your maximum health and mana. This can only trigger once per ability. So once per ability on that. It's not like Gladiator Shield where it's once per ability per god. It's just once per ability. So a little bit more tough there to actually proc it, but that's because its effect is even more palpable. Like, you will feel it even more, because when you get this online, you're going to feel your entire game shift from where you're like, okay, I was bruiser before, I was doing a lot of damage and I was surviving pretty well, but I needed my teammates a lot more. You're going to hit this turning point when you get Shield of the Phoenix in your build, when you get that 5th item online, and you're going to go, oh, I can just sustain now, and it's going to feel really good, and you're going to feel like you're on top of the world, and that's really where the build clicks super hard. Now, this is where I'm going to recommend your last item to you. There's a few different options in this last slot if you even get there in a game, and I'm going to go over them from the ones that I most recommend to the ones that I least recommend, although I think they're all fantastic choices. Number 1, and the one that I've been liking the most, is the World Stone. This thing gives you 75 intelligence, so again, just helps you scale those abilities and hit a little bit harder as you get to that late game, because when you get to that late game, if you're not able to end yet, mainly that's going to be coming from your carries not being able to provide enough damage to chip through the enemies. If that is the case, that's fine. You build a little more damage, and then you can help chip through your enemies just like your teammates can't, and you're usually going to be able to take them down and win the game at that point. This also gives you some more mana and mana regen. We don't really care about that at that point. What we really care about here is the ultimate cooldown passive. This reduces your ultimate cooldown by a flat 30%. And you're going to see here, I can show you, it says a 90-second cooldown on your ultimate here, but when you actually go ahead and use that ultimate, you can see it's a 40-second cooldown, because it doesn't actually show on this tooltip right here the actual cooldown of it with that 30% taken off. So every 40 seconds you can cast and open the gates. This ultimate is so effective at displacing your enemies and spacing them out, because it is a huge area denial ultimate. And if you can snatch someone, even a tank, by themselves, your team can melt them in half a second, and you just open up the entire fight. Again, we'll talk about stuff like that more when we get into the gameplay section, but that is why I recommend this as your last item. If you do not want to build that item, there are other options you can go. You can go a life binder. Something people really like on these squishier sort of mage style supports, and one that I really like too, is life binder. You can go ahead and get this, get some extra intelligence, not nearly as much, 40 less intelligence than you get on the World Zone, so you won't be hitting as hard, but you do get more health and health regen. You also get a passive where you can go ahead and hit enemies, do more damage than with that passive, active I should say, and actually give your teammates some healing and shield. So very good stuff there for some extra sustain. Besides that, if you have a enemy team with a lot of magical damage coming at you, you can go for this. An expensive item, but since it's your last one, it's fine to be a little bit more expensive. It's called Sphere of Negation. I haven't been seeing people build this as much, but I think it's a fantastic item in my opinion. It is very expensive, like I said, but since it's the last item and you're just working towards that anyways, and then working towards 3k pots after that, I think it's completely fine for it to be a little bit more expensive, especially because at this point in the game, you're going to be knocking objectives out like crazy. You should be getting enough gold to get this without too much hassle. This is going to give you 70 intelligence and 100 magical protections. So, like I said, if it's a heavy magical comp, build Sphere of Negation. That is going to negate a lot of that magical damage coming at you and let you push a lot more of your damage out as well. And last but not least, I like to tell you about Wish Granting Pearl, another one of these expensive items. This one is uber expensive. This is a $35.50 price point. Okay, this is buying your girl that freaking Swarovski necklace. This is going to run your bank account down a little bit, but that's fine if you can make it happen, because it gives you 120 intelligence. I think it is the highest intelligence item in the game, if I'm not mistaken. Even fully stacked Thoth, I don't know if it gives you that much intelligence. I suppose Rod with its passive all the way up could give you more. But yeah, it's 120 intelligence. That's a lot. You'd have to read like at least 5 books in real life, and we're not talking green eggs and ham to get 120 intelligence in your little head. Beyond that, like I said, raw stats of 500 max health is really good, and then 250 more max mana, not the best thing in the world, but it will help you out a little bit. So those are the 4 options to really recommend there. There are plenty more you can go. If you can't afford the full Sphere of Negation and there is a high magical comp, you could go Voidstone, completely fine. Reduce their magical protections, you'll hit harder that way, and it helps your teammates out too. But the thing with that is you're not really as close to people when you play Hecate support, so that's why if you do need something like anti-heal, which I suppose I should mention here really quick, if you need anti-heal on Hecate support, usually as support, your job would be to go ahead and get, if I can find it here for you, the Ruinous Ankh. This is like the support anti-heal item, and it procs when you're close to enemies, right? 8.8 meters within you, they get 40% healing. On Hecate, if you're that close throughout a lot of the game, it can be a bit of a death sentence, even when you do have some pretty good bruiser tank on you and some sustain. So what you can do instead of going this World Stone or anything else in that last slot, you can just get a Divine. Even if your teammates already have a Divine, you can stack it up a little bit. It's completely fine. You can get the Divine in there, get some extra intelligence, and get that passive to proc it from a distance. And before we get out of the build section here, last thing I will say is your relic. I like Phantom Shell. You can go a Blink. If you really need a Beads for an Ares or a Fenrir, you can get that. I personally think a Beads or an Aegis as support is a little greedy because you're there to help your teammates. If you have to die sometimes, even to sacrifice your entire life, do it. As long as you can get your teammates a play, that's fine. You're fine to trade your life. I don't care if your KD is down in the dumps. As long as you are winning that game and getting your teammates those setups, that's what your job is to support. And a lot of the times, if there's like an Ares, for instance, a really easy counter you can do is when he's going to snatch you with his chains, you can actually time your ultimate so that right when he comes down from his chains, you go like this, and then boop, you land, and he immediately gets teleported, and then you just take your TP, bing, and then you and Ares, are at the same spot right in front of your teammates, and you can hit him with a 1 that's in the mez mode and mez him in front of your teammates. Very good strategy right there. If a Fenrir does go ahead and grab you, you can go ahead and just portal as soon as you land and bring him right back to your teammates, whatever it may be. It's very easy to get yourself out, especially with World Stone when only 40-second cooldown on your ult there. It's easy to spam it like that when you need to. But I guess that is one more item that I would mention. Team Beads, Talisman of Purification, always a good item, and it's the one active besides Lifebinder that I would recommend in this build, because you can just build this and then give your entire team beads in case they need it. So keep that in mind too. Of course, any kind of build is never going to be set in stone. It's always going to be up to the enemy's team composition and what you need in that moment. But this is what I've been building for the most part, almost every game, because it fits every situation to a T. But if you do need things like this, sometimes I have to sub out because I'm like, okay, we're just getting CC'd way too hard. They're controlling us way too much CC. I'll sub out something for the Talisman of Purification. Just fine. Honestly, I usually do the Genjis because this is the same amount of magical protections, so just sub out the Genjis and get a Talisman instead. But with all of that said, that is the entire build for you right there. I'll put it on screen for you so you can see that right in the middle right now. That's the build. That's where you're going to be going. And now I want to talk about how to actually apply it in your own gameplay. From the very first seconds as you spawn in, what you're going to be buying, from that first time going to lane, how you're going to be clearing that first camp, that first wave, and then as you're going to be roaming throughout the game, to the mid game, into the late game, how you're playing this character in support with this build and this aspect. That's what we're going to be talking about now. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Okay, so the second one of the game, you just spawned in, you're looking around, my teammates, they look incompetent as usual, lovely, but the only thing you can control in a SMITE match is yourself, so let's start with that. What are you going to build? Well, we already know that, but how are you going to build it right when you're leaving base? I would recommend, like I said earlier, grab your Warrior's Axe. That's going to take some of your money away, 650. This is a little bit more expensive than these regular support starters, but that's completely fine. After that, you're going to go ahead, click your physical protection tree right here, and do not just left click, double left click, double right click, whatever the button is on controller to buy Gladiator Shield. No, click Gladiator Shield once, go into the tree yourself. If you don't go into the tree yourself, what it's going to do is it's going to auto buy you one of these items, usually the one to the very left. What you want to do is make sure you buy specifically the ring, in my opinion. This is going to give you 5 cooldown rate just flat. If you are against a heavy physical lane, like say a Fenrir and a Jingwei, you could start the shield right here and get 7 physical prot right off the bat. Or you could just go right for some max health. But I recommend just getting this ring online so you can get some extra cooldowns right from the get-go. Once you have the axe, I can't show you the base form because I already bought this and I can't go back, but once you have your Warrior's Axe and your ring, you're going to come to your consumables. You can buy 2 health pots and 2 mana pots. That's all your money right from the get-go. And like I said earlier, buy yourself your shell or your blink, up to you, but I recommend shell. Shells are really freaking good. That's going to be your start. That's what you're going to get right out the gate. Okay, so what are we doing right off the bat? which ability do we want to start first so we can have the fastest clear on our purple buff and get to waves quickly as possible? Well, that's pretty simple. It's going to be your 3. And I'm going to show you really quickly. If you're looking at these things, this has 85 damage on it. Your 1 has 60. Your 1 has another part to it where you can see it marks enemies to take 10 more damage. So even counting that extra damage, it's still only 70 damage, whereas your 3 is 85 damage right off the bat. So you're going to start your 3 pretty good. This is going to be your shield ability. You can see it goes in a little circle around you. You can put this on yourself or your teammates, which I don't have any in practice right now because it's just me, but you can put this on whoever you want. I recommend having this on instant cast. Okay, well, I'm breaking it, but the point is you can go ahead and just click yourself like that very easily. So you just throw an auto at the middle camp, it'll run towards you, and then you go ahead and just throw your shield on top of you right there. Boop, just like that. It'll start clearing the wave pretty quickly, as long as you have like really any ADC on your team, especially though like an Izanami or an Uller, you're going to clear really, really quickly, and you're going to be getting the lane really quickly. Another thing I want to recommend you do, all in that first purple buff, can I change this camp to a purple buff? I don't know if I can do that, but every buff has its own unique starting fight that it does with you, or its own unique ability, I should say. Like these guys have a little manticore tail on the back of them, a little scorpion tail, and they do like a straight line at you that shoots and hurts you. Cool. The purple buff has a cone attack, and when it does the cone attack, it actually self-roots itself, so it can't turn anymore. So what you want to do is pull the purple buff. Let's say this like door right here is the edge of the purple buff. You want to pull it all the way to the edge without stepping out, and then you're going to keep hitting it, autoing it, and your ADC is going to be standing, let's say, right here on the side shooting it. And right when it does that cone attack, you're going to step backwards and keep shooting while you're going towards the lane. And once it gets to around 150 HP, you're going to stop autoing that camp right there and then walk towards lane. That's going to let your ADC take no damage from the spit attack because they're standing on the side of it and the actual camp doesn't turn while they're fighting your ADC. And then by the time you get to lane, you're going to get the first creep that dies, because usually when you get to lane, the creeps always kill one another. One of the creeps is always dead before you get to lane, unless you have really good clear. But if you clear it like that and use your ranged autos like that, then you get all of the clear experience and gold for the camp, and you get every single one of the first 6 minions on the first minion wave. So make sure you're doing that. You'll get there. You'll get that first one. It's a little risky to start your shield once you get to the first wave, only because when you walk in, you're not going to be very tanky yet, and you have to walk in between the 2 minions. So let's say, you know, the melees are over here to my left and the range are over here to my right, and I have to walk in between them and go like this to get my shield on both of them. That can be a little risky, so be careful of that and notice where the enemies are coming in. If you have to give up that little bit of clear to give up lane pressure because they have an Izanami and a Bacchus, they have really good lane pressure, that's fine. Back up, wait a couple waves. I promise you, once you get a couple abilities online, you will reclaim pressure. After that, you're going to be looking to proc your axe whenever it's up. You can do that with auto attacks, you can do that with your 3, and very easily, you can do that with your 2. And that's what we're going to start getting into with this 2. Why is this 2 so good? Let's level a few times, and I can kind of show you here. Unfortunately, I can't show you perfectly, but let's go ahead and hit level 5 here so I can show you the first level 5 levels you're going to be doing here. Let's assume you have done your first back and you were able to optimally farm for quite a while. You hit level 5 and you had enough money to go ahead, which is 1950 there, and get your full glad shield. That would be an optimal back. You're probably not going to do that on your first back, and as I can actually show you here, as long as you can get this thing right here, it's 850 plus 400 for these 2 items. So was that like 1250 or something? As long as you have that amount of gold, then you can back and get these tier 2s at least, and then you can walk back to lane with 10 of physical protection, 10 cooldown, and a bunch of extra more physical protection and max health. And then it's only 700 until your next back. And if you use your TP correctly, then you can do it completely fine. And especially once you get that gladiator shield, you're probably going to be looking to roam a little bit, so it's completely fine if you need to take 2 backs to do it. But optimally, let's say you just backed, you hit level 5, and you got your gladiator shield online. Cool, you're doing good. What do you want to do now? Most of the time, you want to go back to dual lane for a little while. Right now, supports in SMITE 2, especially the way I've been playing support, you're usually starting to roam out of dual lane a little bit later than I would say in SMITE 1. Personally, I've been roaming at around levels 6 and 7, whereas when I hit level 5 in SMITE 1, that's when I was really looking to roam because you had that ultimate potential in other lanes. But people are roaming or sticking around dual lane a lot more in SMITE 2, which is not my favorite way to play, but it's kind of what the meta is right now, so keep that in mind. But let's talk about these first 5 levels before we start talking about that too much. What do you want to level after year 3 here? Well, that completely depends on how much control you have over the lane. If you have an Izanami as your partner, for instance, and she's clearing the lane really good, then you don't necessarily need to level your 1 to get that extra wave clear, so you could go ahead and just grab your 2. Especially if you're fighting something like an Oler who's spamming a lot of abilities, I would recommend grabbing your 2 second. Then you can actually place it, and I can show you that with the aspect. It's going to be this entire big area, and you can see it's quite big. But what is the actual area doing with this aspect? Well, I can show you that really quickly. What it does, instead of the usual thing where you put your 2 down and you can let people cast abilities in here and it charges your passive down here and then you refire it, it just lasts for a few seconds and you can see it lasting there until it actually goes. You can see 1, 2, 3, it's like 5 seconds or something, 4 seconds, there you go. And it actually reduces the damage that enemies' abilities do by 10%, which early game is only going to amount to probably 10, 15 damage, but late game, it's going to result in 50, 100 damage being taken off of abilities. When you're talking about these big late game mage hitting abilities, it does quite a bit for you. So the other thing it does, and whenever somebody uses an ability, an enemy uses an ability inside the radius of this, it fires a projectile at them. And I think now you're probably starting to see why this is so good with a proc build. So every time you have this 2 out, and somebody uses an ability inside of it, an enemy we should say, it's going to proc all of your items, including your axe, your gladiator shield. It's going to slow them with your gem of isolation. It's going to proc your phoenix shield on them so you can heal. That's a lot of stuff right there. And the rest of our build, like we said, once we get it online here, is going to be about being able to just spam that as much as possible, and that is what you are looking at. But even just with your gladiator shield online and this at level 1, it's already an 8-second cooldown and it lasts for 4 seconds, so you only have at level 1 with 10 cooldown rate a 4-second downtime, 4.18 second downtime on this ability between each cast, which is pretty insane. After that, you're going to go ahead and grab your 1 just so you can have a level in all of those, and then you'll be level 4 by that point. What ability do we want to max first? Thanks for asking. You're looking cute, by the way, today. So now we're level 4. Now we have to look at what ability do we want to actually max out first. The answer to that for me is almost always going to be the 2. It is the star of the show. The 2 is what's going to be providing you with the most damage throughout these games, and you will have a lot of damage in these games with this aspect. In support, there's often times where I'm finishing as top damage, if not maybe 1,000 to 3,000 damage under my top damage dealer. And we're talking usually around 30k damage at least, if not to 40k sometimes. Like I've had some huge damage games. So you can see this scales pretty darn good, 90, but of course it's the enemies casting inside of it that is so good. And it is scaling 20% off intelligence, which is not the best scaling, but you should remember, as I can show you down here in the bottom left, see this right here? When I use abilities in here, including my shield, which charges at 3, it is still scaling just like your regular 2. So if you don't know your regular 2 on Hecate, whenever you use an ability inside of your radius, or anybody uses an ability inside of your radius, I should say, it's actually going to make it scale harder and do more damage when it actually hits. It's the same thing on this, unless it is lying with that, but I'm pretty sure it shows it for a reason because it's still actually going cray with it. So you are going to fully level your 2 first, but obviously level 5. Go ahead, you have your ult now, very good. And now you can actually start roaming around, grabbing people. If you can, you usually want to look at your 1 here. This flips between 2 states, the blue and the purple state. When it's in the purple state like this, what you're going to want to do is mez somebody, and then just go ahead and ult them, and usually while they're mezzed, you can go ahead and grab them. You're going to need to get their beads out of them. This ult is a huge beads baiter, and ult baiter, stuff like that. Just get CC immunity off of someone, and you can see it's 90 seconds. It's quite a bit to start with, but it also does pretty good damage right there, so you can help collect some kills right there yourself. If you have to get the last hits, then that's okay. You can see our 1 goes back to the blue stance, which is also good for just proccing extra damage on people. Like I said, just go ahead, hit somebody, and then your teammate can go ahead and hit them. It's kind of like a Morrigan too in that way. All right, so now we are roaming. We're going around the map. We hit, let's say, level 7. We have our 2 up to level 4. It's scaled up enough to where it's hitting for 150 every single time somebody uses an ability inside of our build radius here. We're feeling pretty good. We have our entire breastplate of valor. We're like, okay, you know what? I feel pretty strong now. I think that I could put some impact on this map. What do I want to do? Let's say we want to roam now. We want to go around towards middle lane usually, check out what's happening there. You need to be a little careful. When you go to middle lane, you're usually going to be fighting more of a mage character that has magical scaling, so you're not going to be as effective against them yet, not as tanky, I should say, because you only have physical protection so far. That could be a little bit of the dangerous part and why you kind of want to hang around and maybe camp your dual lane a little more, because most of the time your ADC is going to be a physical damage character, so you want to fight around those physical damage enemies so that you can negate as much damage as possible with the actual physical protections you have. But at this point in time, with these two items, like we said, we have 35 cooldown rate, so we're feeling pretty good. Our ultimate is up to down to, I should say, an 81-second cooldown here, and that was actually down to that below before, but I saw 90 cost, not 90 cooldown, so my apologies to that before. Your 2 is down to a 6.67 cooldown right there, 667. You know who that is. So again, that is a 2.67 interval between the amounts that you can spam this, because this is up for 4 seconds. So we cast this, it's up for 4 seconds. Watch, this is going to be at 2.67 seconds right there when it actually fades from the sky and then goes back to cooldown, and then we can just use it again. So you're spamming this like crazy already with 2 items. You're just gonna be roaming around the map looking for fights really with a character like this. You have a lot of damage in your kit, just base and pretty good scaling. So you're just gonna go knock people out. Just CC, be annoying, and just proc, annoy. Go to as many camps as possible with your mid laner, with your ADC, and just tear stuff up. Look for good rotations with your jungler, especially. If you see they're rotating somewhere, you can say, I'll come with you. You're going to gank solo lane. I'll take the side TP. I'll TP over there behind the enemy solo laner. We'll just do a little trio gank right there with the support, which is you, the jungle, and the solo laner. Take them out really quickly. That's kind of stuff you're looking for. You're going to be a little farther in the game, and then you're going to say one of 2 things. And this is where I'm going to talk about the actual build order. This is almost always going to be your first 2 items. Even if you're against a higher magic comp, you're still usually going to go these 2 items first. But when it comes to your 3rd item, that's where things can switch up. There's 2 choices here, like I showed you before. You can go for the Gem of Isolation. This is my usual 3rd item, but if you're getting maxed a lot, if you're getting beat up a lot, what you can do is not go your Gem of Isolation yet and go straight into the actual Genji's Guard, especially if you're fighting a lot of magical damage enemies, which will happen pretty often in team comps right now in SMITE 2, then you can go ahead and get the Genji's Guard, but I personally like to get this Gem of Isolation online because you just become even more annoying to the enemies. Now every time you cast your 2, what's happening? Okay, let's say Little Rock comes in. He wants to use his heal. Boop, he pops his heal down. Cool, guess what? He just got hit by my 2, and now he's slowed. He got hit by my Gladiator Shield proc, and he just procced my Sundering Axe. So that's 3 things already. That's proccing on him just because he pressed a button inside of my 2. He's not going to be very happy at that point. He's going to be quite annoyed, and that's kind of part of the gameplay flow with this character, this aspect. You're just annoying. You are a little freaking gnat, and you are sucking on some cheeks, and that's okay. Now, after that, once we have the Gem of Iso online, we're going to go ahead and go over, like we said, to the Genji's Guard. This will give you that magical protection, like we said. And again, another nice smack of cooldown rate right there. At this point, like we said, we're at 10, 35, 45 for this cooldown rate. And that's where I'll talk about cooldown rate a little bit. In SMITE 2, almost every single stat in the game, if not every single stat in the game, has diminishing returns once you reach a soft cap. A soft cap is usually going to be exactly what it was in SMITE 1, but in SMITE 1, it was a hard cap. So in SMITE 1, you could get cooldowns up to 40%, but once you did that, that was it. You could build another item with cooldowns on it, but it wasn't going to do anything for you. It was going to do literally nothing for you. But in SMITE 2, you can keep building past 40%, but you get diminishing returns on your cooldowns. So I can even show you here. Let's look at this. It's a 6.21 second on our spell leader, right? On our 2 right here. If we sell this Genji's Guard, we lose that cooldown. It was a 6.67. So you can see once you get past that diminishing return, it's not as good, but it is still nice, especially when we're trying to get as close to 100% uptime on this 2 as possible. And with this build, with some extra passives and stuff, you do almost have 100% uptime, but we'll talk about that very soon. So at this point, you're feeling pretty tanky. You're gonna be running around the map. With your Genji's online, you're probably gonna be at least level, let's say 13, maybe even 14. You're feeling pretty good. Your 2 is maxed out. You're putting as many points into your ult as possible. And after that, what are you going to level second? Your shield. Your shield hits really hard. And if we're looking at the scaling on these, and the base scaling especially, just the base numbers, this one goes to 265 at max. Your 1 goes to 230 at max. Well, this one has the extra mark, you say, that procs off your teammates doing some damage. True, but the mark is not that much extra. With the full build, I believe it's like 22 extra damage. It's still less damage, fully scaled, than your 3 is. Your 3 actually hits really hard. And how you're going to be wanting to use this 3 most of the time is not going to be on yourself. First of all, we got to remember this is a magical shield. So you can see it's kind of a darker blue shield. It's not like the regular health shields we get with our shell right here. You can see the difference between those 2. This only protects you from magical damage, so it's kind of constrained in that way. You're not as good as Jeb because you can't just go ahead and shield somebody and suck up all the damage they're going to take, you can only suck up that magical damage. So be careful who you cast that on, but who you really want to cast it on is the people that are in there. This is going to work best when you have someone in your team in solo lane that is like a Bellona, a Hercules, an Odin, someone that is getting in there, that is right in the enemy's face, and while they're in there, you're looking to use your shield on them, use your shield on them, use your shield on them, because you can see right now this shield has a cooldown of 8.28 seconds. It's pretty darn often, and you just keep proccing it, especially when you remember this is going to scale up your passive quicker, make you hit harder with that spell eater. And every time you cast a shield on an enemy, it's going to really help that person that's diving, especially if it's like a Bellona that's hitting with auto attacks, because what's going to happen when you cast that shield on your teammate and hit the enemy? Well, one, they're going to suck up some magical damage on your teammate. Two, you're going to proc both of your damage items and your Gem of Isolation. You're going to slow that enemy for your teammate. Three, your shield also gives a 15% movement speed buff to whoever you cast it on, including yourself. So when you cast it on your teammate, it's going to slow the enemy they're sticking to, and it's going to increase their movement speed. So they're going to stick to them like they have a haste and fatalis in their pocket. After that, it is just incredible for the actual damage. I'm telling you, this thing stacks up like crazy, and especially when you're like the last one alive in a fight or something, and you can just cast this on yourself, you are just such a shifty little weasel. It is an amazing ability. Level that second. And honestly, we'll talk about the next item, and then we'll talk about full level, I think. So after we go ahead and grab that, what are we grabbing next? Well, we're going to go over to the Shield of the Phoenix. Like we said, we're going to get even more cooldown rate, and you can see our cooldowns now. What's our 2 at? It's at 5.81 seconds. That's all the cooldown we're going to get in our kit. So you're going to have a 5.81 second cooldown. So a 1.81 second, a less than 2 second downtime on your spell eater here. Again, let's use it. We'll count down these 4 seconds here, and we'll watch our cooldown in the bottom of the screen, and just like that, it's already back up. Now, how do we have like 100% cooldown, Roger? You're kind of saying like I have it all the time up, but it's down for a couple seconds there. Not really, because you got to remember, you have the passive from your breastplate, which is going to reduce your cooldowns by 1 second, which is putting that, if this went off while this was on cooldown, cool. Now you had a 0.81 second cooldown on your 2. If your Genjis went off while this was on cooldown, this has reduced your cooldowns by 3 seconds. So that immediately came back up. You almost always have your 2 up, and it's absolutely amazing because when you're spamming that in late game fights, the enemy team has 10% of the damage taken off just flat of their abilities, and you are just smacking the kunk out of them and slowing the kunk out of them and healing yourself off of your Shield of the Phoenix, because that's the beautiful thing about this too, and that's why I said earlier, this is where it really pops. This is where you start feeling like an absolute machine. When you're casting this too, boop, it hits somebody. Oh, you just healed from your Shield of the Phoenix. You just healed from your Sundering Axe, which by the way, your Sundering Axe does damage to enemy gods, 150 plus 10% of your protections from items, true damage, and restores 100 health. So just another way to heal. And we said true damage. True damage is not going to be brought down by these protections and stuff. It's a yellow number. It's just straight in there. It's true damage. They changed how the formulas work nowadays, but I think it applies after damage mitigated. Maybe before. I forget. If somebody knows in the comments, please clarify for that for me, because they're changing some stuff in SMITE too. I'm not exactly sure, but true damage is the easiest way to do damage in SMITE, because it's not going to go through all the craziness of the reduction that prots and whatnot will do to regular magical or physical damage abilities. All right, so let's go ahead and grab our last item, and while we do that, let's go ahead and put ourselves to level 20 and talk about the rest of the leveling really quick. So you finally reached late game, you're up to level 20, you farmed very efficiently. What are you looking to do now? Well, now you're looking to end the game. You're looking to fight around objectives, especially Fire Giant, because Fire Giant is like the biggest and almost the only really useful thing on the map late game. Gold Fury is really useful, but mostly because Gold Fury has 3 stacking effects it can give to you. You don't really want to siege as much in SMITE 2 until you can have 3 Gold Furies, in my opinion, because when you get 3 Gold Furies, you get 50 protections when you're under a tower, and you get a bunch of extra tower damage. You know, you do damage, extra damage, percentage damage, I should say, to those towers. I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but you'll see it when you're in game. Take that 3rd Gold Fury. You're going to want that before you siege. Besides that, you're fighting around a lot of Fire Giants, and when you have those objectives, and you can just throw your 2 down like this, and the enemies are walking in, this is up the entire time. What are they going to do? They're just slinging abilities, especially if they're standing on the Fire Giant and they're trying to do it. Let's say there's, like we said earlier before, a Bellona sitting on top of the Fire Giant, she's tanking it. Or a Jeb, he's sitting on top of the Fire Giant, he's tanking it. He wants to be in melee range so he can keep hitting it the entire time. You throw your 2 down every time he shields his teammate, every time he uses his 2, every time he uses his ult, his rollout, whatever it may be, he's casting your 2 down right on top of himself and hitting that Fire Giant and giving you an even better chance of securing it and slowing himself and proccing all your items so you're beating the smack out of him too. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the leveling of these abilities to finish it off here. Pretty simple, like I said, you're gonna max out your 3 here, and then you're gonna go ahead and get the ult and the 1 all the way. And by that point, you're hitting pretty darn hard. Like we said, the cooldown on this ult, just base this point, is 58 seconds, 40 seconds once we get this World Stone, which of course we will go ahead and grab here, and then we can talk about that a little bit more in just a second. Your shield at this point, what's the cooldown on that? It's going to be 7.74 seconds. Like we said, 5.81 on the 2 on the spell leader here. And your 1 is on a 4.52 second cooldown. So like I said earlier, this is a 1.52 second cooldown if your Genji's ever goes off. Like, it's insane stuff. You are just spamming. And especially when you want to switch between these forms as often as possible to get the purple one and then to get the blue one out next, you want as much cooldown as possible. Last but not least, okay, what do we have now that we're full build? We have our World Stone here. Very good, because now we can just spam as many ults as possible. There's a big team fight in front of a Phoenix. Let's say this is the Phoenix up there. Boop, we just cast that. Oh, we just caught a couple of their teammates. They're teleported down to us. And in 40 seconds, I can do that again, which late game, 40 seconds. Death timers are longer than that. So as soon as they spawn, and let me tell you this right now, something that is super strong about this is when you're going in to kill the Titan, Titans, first of all, very weak in Smite 2. You can take them very, very easily. When someone spawns in their fountain, you can immediately out-ult their fountain and yoink them straight to you, kill them in half a second, and then just keep killing the Titan. It is an extremely strong thing that I've been doing so much lately, and it's just so much fun. Like when Anubis spawns, you just go, yoink, you're mine, and he just spawns right in front of you guys, and he's just crying because your team absolutely decimates the poor little guy. Super fun tactic right there, one you're going to want to implement as much as possible. And for the most part, that is how the build is all coming together. You're putting down your 2 as much as possible. Like we said, it is very low actual time that it's down. The downtime is 1.81 seconds, and with your breastplate and your Genjis, that timer is oftentimes going to be almost 0 seconds. So you're having enemies just hit themselves over and over again. I like to call this build the why are you hitting yourself build, because oftentimes you're just casting there too, and they're just proccing all of your items. They're proccing your axe, they're proccing your gladiator shield, they're proccing your gem of isolation, so you're constantly slowing them. They're proccing your shield of the Phoenix, so you're constantly healing yourself. And that's what the entire thing of this build is. It's not the craziest thing in the world, but it's extremely fun, and people can't play around it. What's the counter to Hecate 2 with the aspect? You can say it. I know we're all thinking it. Don't shoot. Don't use your abilities. Don't do it. You don't have that choice all the time. If you don't use your abilities for 4 seconds in the late game, you're dead. You have to use your abilities. So there really is no true counterplay to it unless you want to say lose, which is not really fun, but at the same time, that aspect is quite balanced because it doesn't hit that hard. And if you're going to go true damage Hecate, you're better off not building the aspect because you would hit way harder with your regular 2 than you do from this 2, but it's just so good in support. Last but not least, like we said, team comps are going to come into this sometimes in the actual order that you build these items and whatnot. If they are a heavily magic team, like I said, you can go ahead and you can grab something like the Spear of Negation. You can get this Life Binder if you just want to do more damage and give your teammates some extra heals and procs, or you can go this Wish Granting if you can really save up enough money for it. But most of the time, I do recommend the World Stone. You can also just get a Chronos if you need to, or like I said, a Divine if you need anti-heal. There's so many little things you can put in as your last item, but I really have been liking this World Stone lately because it's just so applicable to just keeping the enemies zoned, because that's what it is. You have a huge circle, you have a small line that's not really hard to hit, to be honest with you, and then another moderately sized circle that you can place on any teammate at literally any time. You have so much zoning, you have so much area control and denial with this build, and with this aspect, that's what you're looking to do, and that's why this thing is so darn strong and why I've been loving it so much. And with that, I think I've covered everything about this build, how you're going to be using it throughout your own games, why you're picking up the items you are picking up, and how they actually apply themselves to the aspect and to every single ability that you're having, the cooldowns of your abilities, everything in there is, I think, everything I wanted to mention about it. In case I missed anything else, then I can always put it in the comments. And if you have any questions or comments of your own, if you've been using a build similar to this, please leave me a comment. I'd love to know it. And if you want to see some raw gameplay commentary with this build, I could probably do that. I used to make only gameplay commentary videos for Smite, but I want to try to make some different kind of content and kind of explore the niche of making more in-depth guide type content on Smite, especially as we're moving into Smite 2 here and new players are coming into the game, because I think that's something that the community can really use, and it's a type of content that I've explored and done for many, many years on other games, especially on my main channel, which I've been doing Marvel Rivals content there, by the way, and it's been blowing up quite a bit. So if you want to go check that out, Roger Blinks, or just go to my channel page, you can check out that. And also join the Discord. I would love to see you guys in there. It's called the Aquarium. We're always chatting. We're always talking about Smite and Marvel Rivals and anything else under the sun, really just chatting all the time. I made a new role the other day called Daily Check-In if you want to go that, because the world is a tough place right now, and it can be kind of mentally draining. So every day, at some point, usually around 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'll at that role and I'll just say, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? Talk to me. And we chat for a while. So if that sounds like something you would be into, then I'd very much appreciate that. And since y'all are my SMITE peeps, if you are interested in supporting me as a creator, you can use my creator code of Roger, and I'll put the link to the Nexus store. If you're ever going to buy diamonds or gems in SMITE 1 or skins or the Founders Pack on SMITE 2, anything in SMITE 1 or SMITE 2, if you're going to buy and you want to support me, then go ahead to the SMITE Nexus and then put in the creator code Roger, or like I said, click the link below in the description because it'll take you straight there and it'll implement my creator code, and I will get a cut of the transaction there when you do that. And it doesn't cost you anything extra. It's the same in price as you would pay in game. And I get a little kickback from that. So if it's something you're interested in, then I would appreciate that. Or if you want to help, I actually just became an ambassador for Advanced GG, which is something you can go ahead, a little supplement to put in your water that I've been using a lot. I'm very excited to get some more very soon to give yourself a little bit of energy. There's ones that just are for hydration that just taste good, or ones that help you focus, especially for gaming. It's been very nice for me to just keep myself awake and focused, and it's an all natural product that honestly I would only ever support or put something out there and advertise it if I actually believed in the product. That's just something that I kind of live by for my channel and any content I make. So if I'm promoting something new, then I actually believe in that product. So if you want to buy anything from that company as well, go ahead. I will have that linked in the description that you can click that link and it'll take you straight there. And if you buy something off that link or use my code of Roger10, you can get 10% off your purchase, your entire purchase, and I'll get a little kickback of that as well. So just another little way you can support me, or become a member on my main channel if you want to do that, because I'm only going to keep a membership on one of my channels, I think, not try to double dip on memberships. But it's just some pluggy stuff I wanted to say right there at the end if you managed to watch through the entire video, and I really appreciate it. But thank you guys so much for watching this far into the video. If you have any other gods, any other stuff you want to see videos and builds made on, then let me know and I'll look into that. I have a few in the works, including maybe a Nuwa support, a Cupid support, maybe some Mulan support and whatnot. It's gonna be a lot of support stuff because I've been just playing support in ranked. So you're gonna be seeing a lot of support videos. So if you're into that, you came to the right place. But hey, that is gonna do it for me today. So as always, have a great day.